The invitation itself looked harmless, an elegant Clarence House luncheon quietly added to the royal calendar without fanfare or ceremony. But when Prince William and Princess Catherine failed to appear, the silence that followed inside palace corridors became louder than any public statement. Courtiers exchanged uneasy glances, senior aides reportedly scrambled behind closed doors, and within hours, whispers of a deepening fracture at the heart of the monarchy began spreading through the very institution designed to conceal them. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. What made the situation impossible to ignore was not merely the absence itself, but the timing surrounding it. For weeks, insiders had quietly hinted that relations between key members of the royal household had grown increasingly strained behind closed doors. Public appearances still carried their familiar smiles, carefully measured gestures, and polished diplomatic warmth, yet something underneath had shifted. Staff members reportedly noticed shorter conversations, delayed responses to invitations, and an atmosphere so tense that even long-serving aides began avoiding certain private discussions altogether. Then came the luncheon at Clarence House, supposedly arranged as a carefully orchestrated display of unity during a period when the monarchy desperately needed stability. It was meant to reassure the public. Instead, it triggered panic within palace walls. According to whispers circulating among royal insiders, the invitation was not viewed by William and Catherine as a simple family gathering. Behind the elegant silverware and formal seating arrangements, there were allegedly deeper conversations expected to take place, conversations involving loyalty, influence, and the future direction of the monarchy itself. Some believed the lunch had been strategically designed to create a public image of harmony at a moment when private disagreements were becoming impossible to contain. That was why their sudden refusal reportedly sent shockwaves through senior staff. Preparations had already been finalized, seating plans confirmed, security adjusted. Yet at the final moment, word arrived that the Prince and Princess of Wales would not attend. No dramatic explanation followed, no emotional statement emerged, just absence. Cold, deliberate absence. Inside the palace, that silence quickly became interpreted as something far more powerful than words. Royal households survive on symbolism. Every appearance, every handshake, every shared meal carries meaning, and when senior royals intentionally distance themselves from a carefully planned gathering, people notice. Especially the people inside the institution itself. Reports began surfacing that several aides were blindsided by the decision, with some allegedly learning of the cancellation only moments before guests were expected to arrive. One insider would later describe the atmosphere as icy, claiming conversations abruptly stopped whenever certain names entered the room. Another reportedly suggested that tensions had escalated after a series of disagreements that had quietly unfolded over previous weeks, disagreements serious enough to fracture trust at the highest levels of the royal circle. What made the situation even more explosive was the growing belief that William's decision may not have been emotional at all. It may have been strategic. Those closest to palace operations allegedly feared the absence was designed to send a message without ever speaking publicly. Because in royal history, silence has often been the sharpest weapon of all. William understands the institution better than most. He understands symbolism, timing, and perception. And if the future king intentionally chose not to stand beside certain senior figures at a moment carefully crafted to display solidarity, then the implications stretched far beyond one uncomfortable luncheon. Suddenly, courtiers were no longer discussing family tension. They were discussing power. Meanwhile, Catherine's absence fueled even deeper speculation. Traditionally viewed as the stabilizing force within the modern monarchy, her refusal to attend reportedly stunned individuals who believed she would always prioritize appearances for the sake of institutional calm. But insiders began quietly suggesting that Catherine had reached a point where silence and diplomacy were no longer enough to smooth over private frustrations. The growing pressure surrounding royal expectations internal alliances and competing influences may have pushed tensions to a breaking point long before the luncheon invitation ever arrived. And as whispers intensified throughout palace corridors, one unsettling question began lingering over every private conversation. If William and Catherine were willing to distance themselves this openly now, what exactly had become so serious behind closed doors that even the appearance of unity could no longer be maintained? Because the real story was not simply about a missed lunch invitation, it was about what William and Catherine may have been refusing to endorse behind palace walls. Long before the empty seats at Clarence House became front-page gossip, palace administrative streams reportedly hinted at growing disagreements between the Wales household and senior figures surrounding King Charles. Different interpretations of recent meetings describe strained conversations, delayed responses, and unusually formal communication between offices once known for operating in seamless coordination. What appeared outwardly calm was, according to insiders whispering within royal circles, slowly turning into a cold institutional divide. At first, the warning signs were subtle enough to escape public attention. A delayed confirmation here, an unexpected scheduling adjustment there. Small details that meant nothing to outsiders, but carried enormous significance inside royal operations, where precision and coordination are treated almost like sacred rules. For years, Clarence House and Kensington Palace had reportedly functioned with near-perfect alignment, particularly during moments of national scrutiny. But suddenly, aides allegedly found themselves navigating conversations filled with hesitation, carefully measured wording, and unusual layers of approval before even minor decisions could move forward. It was not open warfare. That was what made it so dangerous. The tension was quiet, controlled, buried beneath polished statements and ceremonial appearances. Yet beneath that polished surface, insiders claim trust had begun to erode. Much of the growing strain reportedly centered around the future. King Charles's illness, though publicly managed with calm reassurance, allegedly forced difficult private discussions about long-term planning inside the monarchy. And according to whispers circulating through royal circles, those discussions did not always unfold smoothly. William, increasingly aware of the immense pressure surrounding the institution, was said to have become fiercely protective of Catherine and their children. Not simply as a husband or father, but as a future king, watching the machinery of monarchy place unbearable demands on every generation before him. Those close to the situation reportedly noticed a change in his approach. More cautious, less willing to compromise, more determined to shield his family from the emotional and political storms unfolding behind palace walls. That shift allegedly created friction with senior figures who believed unity had to remain visible at all costs, regardless of private disagreements. Some insiders even suggested William had grown frustrated with what he viewed as outdated institutional instincts, an old royal habit of prioritizing appearances, while personal tensions quietly deepened underneath. Meanwhile, Catherine reportedly took an entirely different approach. Rather than escalating conflict, she was believed to favor distance, stability, and emotional restraint. Palace commentators began describing her as the calming force, attempting to prevent the monarchy from drifting into open division. Yet even her efforts could not completely silence the growing discomfort spreading through the royal structure itself. Senior aides allegedly began noticing unusual changes in coordination between households. Meetings once handled jointly were now reportedly approached separately. Communications became more formal, more cautious, almost diplomatic in tone. Even routine scheduling decisions reportedly required additional layers of review. To the outside world, none of it appeared dramatic. But within palace systems built on trust and constant collaboration, those subtle changes carried enormous weight. Because when royal households begin operating less like family and more like competing institutions, the implications become impossible to ignore. That was why the Clarence House luncheon invitation sparked such explosive speculation among royal observers. Many believed it was never simply about sharing a meal, According to commentators following the growing tensions, the invitation may have carried deeper political symbolism tied to loyalty, visibility, and the public projection of unity during an increasingly fragile period for the monarchy. If William and Catherine attended, the image of stability remained intact. If they refused, questions would inevitably follow. And when the refusal reportedly came at the last moment, palace insiders understood immediately that something far larger was unfolding beneath the surface. Because by then, the whispers were no longer confined to private corridors or discreet conversations between aides. The rumors had begun spreading beyond palace walls, drawing attention toward alliances, influence, and unresolved tensions many believed had been quietly building for months. And as the rumors intensified, attention quickly shifted toward one figure many believed remained at the center of the growing unease. It is now whispered in the highest echelons of royal reporting that Queen Camilla's expected presence at the luncheon may have transformed a routine family gathering into something far more complicated. Reports suggest William has grown increasingly cautious about internal palace dynamics involving influence, access, and long-term authority. What once looked like manageable tensions behind the scenes now appeared dangerously close to becoming an open power struggle unfolding inside the sacred geography of the British monarchy. For years, palace insiders carefully dismissed rumors of rivalry as exaggerated tabloid fantasy, insisting the monarchy remained united behind closed doors, even during periods of immense strain. But something had changed. The atmosphere surrounding senior royal interactions reportedly no longer carried the effortless coordination that once defined the institution. Instead, conversations became measured, invitations became politically sensitive, and every appearance suddenly seemed loaded with hidden meaning. By the time the Clarence House luncheon was announced, many within royal circles allegedly understood that the event was never just about family togetherness. It was about optics, influence, and the fragile balance of power surrounding the monarchy's future. At the center of growing speculation stood Queen Camilla. While publicly maintaining her carefully managed role beside King Charles, insiders reportedly claimed her expanding influence inside palace structures had begun creating discomfort within the Wales household. Not because of personal hostility alone, but because of what that influence symbolized during a deeply uncertain period for the crown. Royal commentators increasingly pointed toward concerns surrounding access to the king, control of messaging, and the shaping of long-term royal priorities, while Charles continued facing health challenges. In quieter corners of palace conversation, some even questioned whether competing visions for the monarchy were beginning to emerge behind closed doors. William, according to persistent whispers among royal observers, allegedly viewed the situation through the lens of legacy rather than short-term diplomacy. As the future king, he reportedly became more determined to protect the institution he believed he would one day inherit, even if that meant creating uncomfortable distance from certain internal dynamics. Those close to palace operations claimed he had grown deeply cautious about appearances that could later be interpreted as endorsement, alignment, or surrender within broader struggles over influence. It was no longer simply about keeping peace during difficult times. It was about preserving authority for the future. Catherine, meanwhile, reportedly approached the tension with quieter but equally deliberate restraint. Insiders claimed she preferred avoiding what some privately described as performative unity appearances, especially during moments when underlying disagreements remained unresolved. Her focus, according to those familiar with palace culture, centered on stability, family protection, and emotional distance from escalating conflict. But even her calm public image could not stop speculation from spreading. In fact, for some royal journalists, her absence beside William only intensified suspicions that the divide inside palace walls had become far more serious than officials were willing to admit. The luncheon itself was reportedly intended to achieve the opposite effect. Clarence House aides allegedly hoped the gathering would calm growing media speculation surrounding royal tensions and project an image of solidarity during an unstable moment for the monarchy. But when William and Catherine declined to attend, the carefully constructed strategy collapsed almost instantly. Instead of reassuring the public, the absence ignited a fresh wave of questions about succession anxieties, internal alliances, and competing centers of influence around the king. Royal commentators began openly discussing whether the monarchy was quietly entering one of its most delicate transitional periods in decades. Behind the scenes, reports suggested frustration quickly spread through Clarence House offices following the public fallout. Aides who had reportedly worked to arrange the luncheon suddenly found themselves dealing with an avalanche of damaging speculation they had hoped to prevent. And the more palace officials attempted to minimize the significance of the absence, the more the public sensed there was something larger being concealed beneath official silence. Because by then, the issue was no longer confined to one missed gathering or one uncomfortable relationship. The monarchy itself had become the story. And while palace officials attempted to contain the damage, another problem was already beginning to unfold beyond Clarence House walls. No explanation came. No carefully crafted palace statement emerged to smooth over the growing storm. And that silence, according to seasoned royal observers, became the most revealing detail of all. The monarchy has always relied on symbolism, ritual, and controlled appearances to project unity. Yet the absence of William and Catherine from such a carefully staged gathering reportedly shattered the illusion of effortless harmony the palace had spent months trying to preserve. In ordinary circumstances, royal communications teams move with remarkable precision. Even the smallest misunderstanding is usually met with swift clarification, carefully balanced language, and subtle efforts to redirect public attention before speculation grows uncontrollable. But this time, something felt different. Palace officials reportedly declined to publicly address the absence in any meaningful way, offering neither reassurance nor denial as rumors intensified across newspapers, television panels, and royal commentary circles. That silence became deafening. Because within the monarchy, silence is rarely accidental. It is strategic, deliberate, and sometimes deeply revealing. Almost immediately, media outlets began openly speculating about fractures inside the royal household. Commentators who had once cautiously avoided discussions of internal division suddenly spoke with growing confidence about competing priorities behind palace walls. Some described the luncheon controversy as the clearest indication yet that tensions between royal households had moved beyond temporary discomfort into something far more serious. Others pointed toward the increasingly visible separation between Kensington Palace and Clarence House operations, arguing that the absence confirmed what insiders had quietly suspected for months. Unity at the top of the monarchy was beginning to crack under pressure. What unsettled royal supporters even more was the unusual quiet from Clarence House sources themselves. Traditionally, friendly insiders would discreetly guide coverage toward calmer interpretations during moments of controversy. Yet this time, many journalists reportedly noticed hesitation, confusion, and a lack of coordinated messaging from figures usually trusted to steady the narrative. Some observers interpreted that silence as evidence that palace officials themselves had been caught off guard by the scale of the fallout. Others believed something even more troubling, that senior aides understood the conflict had reached a point where carefully managed public relations could no longer fully contain it. Meanwhile, William and Catherine reportedly remained focused on one priority above all others: protecting their family from the escalating turbulence surrounding palace politics. According to insiders, the couple had grown increasingly determined to shield Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis from the emotional strain and institutional pressure consuming royal life behind closed doors. Those close to the Wales household allegedly described a growing frustration with the endless cycle of speculation, strategic appearances, and private negotiations that seemed to dominate senior royal relationships. And while William reportedly viewed certain decisions through the lens of future responsibility, Catherine was believed to be prioritizing emotional stability above all else. That quiet determination only deepened public fascination. Because the more the Wales family withdrew from palace drama, the more symbolic their actions appeared. Every absence, every delayed appearance, every carefully chosen moment of distance became interpreted as a message. And perhaps most painfully for the king himself, reports began emerging that Charles had privately hoped the Clarence House gathering might ease tensions before they grew irreversible. Some insiders even suggested the luncheon was intended as a moment of reconciliation, a controlled opportunity to project calm, while internal disagreements remained manageable. But instead of healing divisions, the failed gathering exposed them to the world. Public reaction quickly transformed the controversy into something larger than palace gossip. Across social media, television discussions, and royal forums, many interpreted William and Catherine's absence as a major symbolic statement about the monarchy's future direction. To some, it reflected frustration with outdated structures and competing influences surrounding the crown. To others, it suggested a future king quietly preparing to redefine how royal authority would operate in a changing era. And as speculation spiraled further, one unsettling reality became impossible to ignore. The monarchy was no longer battling a simple family disagreement. It was confronting growing uncertainty about power, loyalty, and succession itself. And behind that carefully maintained silence, insiders claim preparations were already underway for an even larger confrontation over the monarchy's future direction. For years, Prince William was portrayed as the patient heir, standing quietly behind the throne, carefully respecting tradition while waiting for his moment to arrive. But according to whispers emerging from inside palace operations, that version of William is rapidly disappearing. The future king is reportedly becoming sharper, more strategic, and far less willing to participate in what insiders describe as carefully staged domestic diplomacy designed to preserve fragile appearances inside the monarchy. And nowhere was that shift more visible than in the decision that stunned Clarence House. Because to many royal observers, missing the luncheon was never simple avoidance. It was a message, a deliberate signal that the balance of influence inside the House of Windsor may already be changing. Behind palace walls, reports suggest William has quietly strengthened control over his own long-term royal strategy, with the Wales household allegedly operating more independently from Clarence House than ever before. Younger palace aides are said to increasingly align themselves with William's vision of a leaner, more modern monarchy, one built on discipline, distance from internal drama, and tighter control over family exposure. At the centre of that strategy stands Catherine, described by insiders as both William's emotional anchor and his strongest private supporter during mounting palace tensions. While others reportedly pushed for symbolic public unity, Catherine is believed to have favoured caution, stability, and protecting their children from the growing storms surrounding the crown. And perhaps that is what makes the situation so emotionally devastating for King Charles himself. Because behind the grandeur of Buckingham Palace and the carefully guarded rituals of royal life, reports suggest the king now faces a painful realization. The monarchy he spent decades preparing to inherit may already be evolving beyond his control. Charles reportedly hoped the luncheon would project family unity during one of the most difficult periods of his reign, especially as illness, exhaustion, and growing public scrutiny continue to weigh heavily on him. Instead, the mist gathering deepened fears of internal fractures that palace officials could no longer easily contain. Observers now openly speculate that William is positioning himself for a future monarchy built on very different principles from the institution Charles spent his life protecting. Meanwhile, Clarence House insiders are reportedly unsettled by the scale of public speculation surrounding loyalty, influence, and succession itself. Because within royal history, symbolism matters. And when a future king refuses to participate in a carefully orchestrated display of harmony, people notice. Courtiers notice. The public notices. Most painfully of all, the king notices. Now the monarchy stands suspended between two eras, one struggling to preserve tradition, the other quietly preparing to redefine it. And inside the House of Windsor, missed invitations are rarely forgotten. Sometimes, they become the first unmistakable sign that the balance of royal power has already begun to change forever. According to interpretations quietly circulating among palace insiders, the skipped Clarence House luncheon was never viewed as an isolated incident behind royal walls. Long before the public noticed the empty seats, some aides reportedly sensed the atmosphere inside the monarchy beginning to change through subtle scheduling disruptions, delayed communications, and unusually cautious exchanges between royal households once known for operating with seamless precision. What the world witnessed as one absence may actually have been the public eruption of tensions palace staff had spent months privately navigating in silence. Reports suggest coordination between Kensington Palace and Clarence House had gradually become strained as deeper disagreements over influence, family priorities, and the monarchy's future quietly intensified. Senior aides allegedly noticed increasing separation in appearances, messaging, and strategic planning, with William and Catherine reportedly placing growing emphasis on privacy, discipline, and control over their household. Insiders claim the Wales family became more determined to protect themselves from the emotional and political turbulence surrounding palace operations, even as Clarence House reportedly hoped the luncheon could restore symbolic unity during an increasingly fragile period for the crown. But instead of calming speculation, the absence triggered something far more serious. Staff members allegedly feared media fallout even before the gathering began, sensing that public questions about royal division were becoming impossible to contain. And when William and Catherine failed to appear, royal commentators immediately described the incident as deeply unusual for an institution built entirely on symbolism and controlled appearances. Because within the House of Windsor, every gesture carries meaning. Every silence becomes a statement. And these empty seats suddenly seem to symbolize a monarchy standing at the edge of generational transformation. Observers now believe the luncheon may ultimately be remembered as a turning point, a moment when the future king and queen signaled they were no longer willing to preserve unity at any cost. William reportedly remains focused on protecting the monarchy's long-term stability, even if it requires difficult distance from older palace dynamics. Catherine, meanwhile, is increasingly viewed as a quiet but deeply powerful influence beside him, helping steady the future heir during one of the institution's most emotionally uncertain chapters. At the same time, reports suggest King Charles has struggled to maintain balance between competing royal factions while attempting to preserve the fragile image of family harmony the monarchy depends upon for survival. Now the palace faces mounting pressure to project stability as speculation surrounding loyalty, influence, and succession continues spreading beyond royal corridors into public consciousness. And as whispers intensify behind closed doors, one haunting question refuses to disappear. What happens when the future heirs begin stepping away from the old system altogether? Because in the House of Windsor, silence often reveals more than speeches ever could, and this silence may have changed the royal family forever. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.